Welcome back, Dragon Ballers, to Get the Mic, the only show where your host on the left, Owl,
And your host on the right, Brock.
discuss the mythological significance of fiction. And in this episode, we're talking about Dragon Ball Episode 45, Danger in the Air. We continue the little mini filler arc that we started last episode with Master Thief Haski. I will say a couple things about this part of the filler. It even though its message and let's just say, yeah, its message has that mythological significance. There's a lot of shots that just contain almost no information and linger for much longer than they should. The message that it's sending is pretty basic, and it's not a story that we haven't already explored. It's more of a review, let's say. It does lead up to what we're gonna see happen with Bluma in the following episodes. But as far as how it's executed, the shots that linger and the really slow pacing of it kind of make apparent that it's filler, I want to say.
Yeah, it's
What do you think
understandable
about that, Brock?
Yeah, I think it's understandable that it's considered to be filler, without really having a context necessarily of where it fits in, I guess, in a cosmic sense with with what Dragon Ball's talking about. It's sort of like, okay, well, that's the amusement park episode. I mean, it's basically a bottle episode. Um, And so it's really easy not to remember much about these episodes in hindsight because it doesn't necessarily feel like it moves that major arc forward for Dragon Ball, right?
But it's also not like Dr. Flap where it's something that contradicts what happens later on. It is something that can be cohesive with the story. It's just
hmm
really slowly paced. Could be condensed to one episode instead of one and a half, let's say.
Yeah, I don't think it was as succinct as it could have been.
Well, let's go ahead and get started with it. I just wanted to lead in with that. So this is Danger in the Air, the episode following Goku in danger and tons of friends or something like that.
Goku and tons and friends in danger.
Goku, friends, tons, and danger friends. So we first see a little bit of a recap. Goku has met up with Bluma and has decided to go to the amusement park after finding Yamcha and Puar and Oolong. We also got to meet briefly Dr. Flap. Dr. Flap, what the We also got to meet Dr. Brief,
The real doctor.
the real Dr. Brief, and a real doctor to begin with, because Dr. Flap didn't actually exist. But we got to meet Dr. Brief. We got to meet Bluma's mom. We met Haski, which is not really as significant as the other people there that we're mentioning. And we also get to see where Bluma's character is at the moment. And currently, she is overwhelmed with jealousy at the fact that other women would find her boyfriend Yamcha attractive. So that's kind of sets the stage for this episode. Anything to say here, Brock?
It's interesting how when we're taking a step back and we're analyzing the character arcs and sort of their motivations and what these images really mean for the characters. This kind of fits nicely in if we're going to be reestablishing Bulma as being tied into the main story, right? We need to set the stage for her and set up where she's at in her character development, as well as where she is morally, right? Because it's like if she because what she's decided in this previous episode, right, is that she's going to go the way of Goku, right? She's going to sort of like hide herself in his image almost and travel with him as he goes.
Maybe not hide the way of Goku, but like definitely take advantage of the insignificance of her spirit to nestle inside the hero and to confront or to, let's say, gain that enlightenment which she's seeking in her life. Like I to mention um another piece of fiction, let's say, her soul right now is in a dreary November morning or something like that. I think that's what it is from Moby Dick. Something like that. A dreary November. And so she's really not happy with where she is in life, and so she just makes the conscious decision to go out into the world and seek that enlightenment.
Hmm.
I think that's what you mean, Brock, when you say she decides to go the way of Goku, right?
Right. She is basically saying, I'm going to emulate Goku, right? By trying to emulate Goku the best that I can, then I can do this as well. But it's interesting still to be able to draw the line between her being able to ride the Nimbus and her being able to do what she's doing right now, right? Because just because she is along for the ride on the way of Goku, it doesn't mean that she herself is good, right? It doesn't mean that she's capable of finding and controlling that and being able to ride that way on her own. She has
Yes.
to identify with Goku, right? Like she needs an icon.
Right. And so, well, let's say, yeah, she needs a medium to transcend her spirit across into a spirit that will transport her in this way, right?
Hmm.
And I think it's to say that normal people can use the spirit of the hero as a vessel to find their way.
Right.
Let's say.
Sure. I mean, it's almost a symbol of emulation, right?
Right, and it's also to say like a flawed attempt at becoming a heroic spirit is divine regardless because you are attempting to make that leap,
Well,
right?
also, I mean, you can think of it in the more mystical Christian sense and making yourself small, right? So that the visible body is the body of the self instead of the I, the ego, right? And so the idea of you should be small, right? You should make, and it's that idea of the emptier your head is, the more room it is to back up with dreams, right?
We'll get
That,
there.
but yeah, that you need to be small, and so that's what she's doing, right? She's emulating in that sense, like, okay, well, I can be small, and my mode of being can be mostly taken up by the emulation, and that can take me on the way, right?
Right. And so
But of course, that gets interrupted by
by
her,
Yamcha.
yeah, confrontation with her ego.
Well, is Yamcha her ego?
No, just that's her internal
Well, I
confrontation,
think
right?
it's
She
her
has to reveal
confrontation.
herself.
Well, no, it's the confrontation with that logo side of herself that can acknowledge the flaws in her thinking, right?
Hmm.
And so her the flaw in the supposition of reducing one spirit in order to emulate the hero could be pointed out by the masculine spirit of the logos, and Bluma doesn't want that at all.
Yeah, it's that sort of scientific way of thinking as well, right? You think of Bulma's father being that scientific thinker, and that's something that Yamcha can do. He can separate those elements, and he can see her and judge her, right? She doesn't want that judgment for her mode of being.
Hmm.
And so, even though she knows that she should respect a judgment, right, and hold herself up to the judgment that she would want to be judged by, right, constantly, she doesn't want to be judged, and that is the setup for all of this conflict.
And so the conflict ensues. Let's go ahead and get started on the episode proper. So we see first our dragon crew and the villain trio of this episode both get through and into the park. A couple things happen. They ride an escalator, which Goku finds amusing. They get to the ticket lady who's asking for tickets. Goku believes that she is calling for a person named Tickets.
I think he believes her name is Tickets, and
And then
he's
and then he thinks, yeah, and then he
yeah,
thinks her name is Ticket. Oh wait, maybe that's a dub sub difference.
could be.
Um but right, and then this part I wanted to mention where they go through the tunnel of all these different lights and sounds, and they emerge on the other end in the amusement park where a statue of a woman reaches up to the sky in a dome with a small hole at the top. So I wanted to mention this because it's reminiscent of the idea of that enlightenment and the not only the enlightenment, but the idea that that tunnel is kind of a process. And to mention, I think it's Joe Rogan's documentary on DMT. It's kind of a gateway into that enlightenment is that tunnel, and I think it's significant that it's a tunnel here, and it's a tunnel of light as well that leads you into this dreamland is what it's called, dreamland.
Yeah, it's like a cosmic transition, right? Like stepping into almost like a cosmic game or joke. With this being an amusement park, but also being this place of, well, it's up in the sky, right? It's almost like it's represented on the staff of Hermes or on a part of a DNA strand, right? And it's elevated up and looks like a brain. And so it's this enlightened experience that once they step onto the spiral, the coil going up, it takes them up, right? They don't have to climb the stairs. It's automatic. It draws them up to that enlightenment.
And they all fly out here and see this, right?
Hmm. And so, I mean, I think that the fact that we see mushrooms surrounding enlightenment so much in the show already is just uh, further evidence that this is kind of what Toriyama would go for if he would use this sort of imagery canonically, right? Because I think that this is the carnival aspect of this is filler, right?
Right, like Goku balancing on the ball and all that.
But I think that this is in the spirit of sort of the story that he's telling, right? Surrounding enlightenment and all of sort of the themes of what Dragon Ball is about.
Right, and this episode is somewhat significantly about Bulma, despite the fact that she has few lines.
Right. It's always a mirror, right?
Right, and so everyone gets into the amusement park, and they enter this land of dreams.
Right. And Husky and the boys get in just by stealing some tickets.
Hmm.
And we see how
Their
she gets away with it
duplicity,
easily.
right? Their duplicity is more than enough to enter this already conquered hierarchy, and that's what I want to say is that it it is a manifestation of the hierarchy in Bulma's hometown that she has already conquered, and it's made manifest in the city because she's already conquered it. I want to say, and that being right, the acknowledgement of Yamcha's pure motivation or like purity towards her that we see iterated upon in the first season. She even says here that she's not going to speak to him until Yamcha apologizes. And for what should Yamcha apologize, Brock?
Well, what should he apologize
Is it his fault that other
for?
women find him attractive?
I still don't know. What should he be apologizing for?
Right, exactly. And that's what I want to say is this is something that Bulma, after knowing what she knows from season 1, should already know. And I think
So
that's why it's made manifest here in
I
her
think that
city.
framing is really good actually to point out what's happened because when we left them off at the end of the first season, the feminine and the masculine had been set into a sort of harmony where they respected each other, right?
And
There's a
instead of jointly together lifting up the corpse of the father to create order together in a new kingdom.
there's disharmony here, right?
Mhm.
And so Bulma has an emotional response that she's waiting for some uh outcome, whereas Yamcha has a logical response to that, being this more logos oriented sort of spirit for Bulma, and they can't connect because she won't meet him and he can't meet her. They don't have that common ground. They're not coming together to form sort of a positive effect on the world or on each other, right?
Right, as the ideal masculine and feminine should. Also, what we see here is Haski tries to throw a walnut at Goku, thinking he won't be able to see the manifestation of her malice in the park. But Goku immediately recognizes it because even like this is a vacation for Goku.
Hmm.
This is nothing. Even the malice that Haski represents is not anything compared to what Goku's spirit can endure, as we've seen from Muscle Tower.
Yeah, there's sort of this ritual we're setting up where everyone who's introduced to Goku has to go through this phase of really underestimating what Goku's spirit is capable of and just sitting here and having not really knowing how to approach him.
I'm gonna have to cut that part out. Say that again.
Uh,
That last part.
Oh, I was just saying that it's sort of a ritual now that every time a new enemy is introduced to the Z gang, they have to spend about half an episode figuring out how to approach Goku and finding out how tough his spirit really could be.
Right, and I think with some of the filler, it does get to a point where the stakes are pretty low because we've already seen Goku conquer spirits much more enduring than the ones that we see in this episode.
Hmm.
But that's not to say exactly all that's there because, like we said, Bulma and Yamcha are more, even though they don't have that many lines, are more center place in this episode because Goku takes up a lot and Haski takes up a lot, but it's Bulma and Yamcha really that get the brunt of development in this episode.
Hmm. It's setting the stage for how they're going to be integrated back into the story.
And so then we see the plot unfold. And this is actually amazing. This is the first clip. Haski decides to be a fortune teller and try to pretend to be accosted, which is what happens right here, by the same red ribbon thugs that she's been using this whole time. As a fortune teller, she tries to tell Goku's fortune, and obviously, knowing the commands or orders from Commander Red, she knows exactly where he's been, so she tells his fortune, quote unquote, and amazes everyone with her seemingly unfounded knowledge and future sight. Then she attempts to entice or coerce Goku to give her the Dragon Balls by um, saying that he has two round important balls under his clothes.
Goku says, "How did you know?"
And so she turns off the lights real quick to try to snag them. Well, she's about to when Goku drops Trow and shows his two round balls.
And of course, she's reaching forward to try to get the Dragon Balls, and then, of course, falls on her face, figuratively and literally.
Figuratively and literally, I like that because it's exactly it, right? It is the idea that Goku doesn't presume to know that the knowledge between like balls, Dragon Balls, and balls, uh, testicles, right? It's not that he doesn't know the difference between them. It's more that he doesn't know that everyone knows the difference between men and women still, which
Right.
is a reiteration of that instance, but I think it's only become present in filler at this point, right?
Um, I suppose it's a running thing in filler. When was the last time that he did it? It was
Well, the last time we see anything like it, right? I think the Colonel Silver thing with Chi Chi and Ox King, I think, was another piece of filler.
is that when he did it last?
I don't know if that's when I think that might be when he did it last, but I can't remember the
Could
specific
be.
instance.
Either way, it is interesting though because it's representative of what we were talking about before with Goku and that discernment and sort of um the idea that Goku as sort of a judge, right, as a judgmental, logos oriented, self centered, not self centered and thinking of himself, but being based on the self character, doesn't differentiate between the
More
masculine and the feminine.
self-centric
Yeah,
than
centric.
self-center.
Um, but doesn't differentiate between the masculine and the feminine, meaning that his virtue is universal, right? And so that differentiation between people doesn't come naturally to him.
I like too that he gazes at her when she's feigning to be a victim, and he looks at her, and Haski gets nervous that she's gonna be revealed somehow,
Just
um,
by his sight.
by his gaze, right,
Hmm.
his sight, and he says that she has a booger on her forehead. when it is more representing that uh it's a mole in the story, but it's like representative of that fortune teller third eye, let's say.
Mhm.
Um
But the him making a joke of it immediately whenever she's trying to trick him with the illusion of it is part of that whole sort of cosmic joke here, right? I mean,
exactly, yeah.
it's set up, and I think great jokes, right? The punchline is sort of in the beginning and the end of it, right? And this is like that.
Right. And so she tries to grab the balls but fails. So then, oops. Then they the trap is sprung and the two red ribbon soldiers bust through, and they tried to get the Dragon Balls, but they failed, so they run away. Goku runs after them and he gives the balls to Yamcha. What would ever happen to them in Yamcha's care, I wonder?
He would definitely be able to hang on to them, and they wouldn't be able to be wrestled away from him by any means, right?
And so, being the imperfect masculine, that which is susceptible and subordinate to the feminine spirit, he is unable to withstand the charms of Haski, and she snags the Dragon Balls from him while Goku was obviously away. But
Right.
I think before she snags them, though, she is trying to seduce him. And we do see here, though, that Goku and the gang have cornered the Red Ribbon thugs and started to question them. But that's not the main issue. They've been distracted from Haski's cause, and I want to distill what Haski is. Right, she's that iteration of deception from Commander Red, rather than, let's say, Major Sergeant Murasaki,
Right.
because
Or
he's
like
that
Shu,
instantiation
right?
of white, or Shu,
Mhm.
and those are like you can think of them as tiers, because Haski is of a higher tier than Murasaki. Obviously, she's not made a fool of in the same way or as much as Murasaki was, and I mean Shu is regularly beaten by his counterpart persona being that of Pilaf.
Right. We see that sort of it sets the stage for an escalation of the power level without explicitly telling you his power level is 1200, right? We're seeing that it's just tiers of principality. It's just layers of power in sort of a more traditional sense of power, right?
And we also see the first instantiation of a deceptive spirit as a female, a chaotic spirit, which I think will be reiterated upon multiple times. Just want to
Mhm.
mention that real quick. So, the balls are entrusted to Yamcha, and he is then attacked by Haski, who's trying to get the balls from him.
Well, I do want to point out that she tries to seduce him, but it doesn't technically
It
work.
doesn't work. Yamcha's spirit is enough to withstand the advances of a stranger. And that is to say something, because I think even today there are many young men who, if an attractive woman would come to them, they would be seduced, no matter what the
Immediately.
circumstance and no matter how deceptive the spirit is. I mean, just look at Quick, for example.
That's an example. It's it's definitely something that is obvious that Yamcha would be weak against, right? This powerful feminine spirit that is deceptive and knows his vulnerability.
Feigned affection as well.
Hmm.
I think that's important to it, because Yamcha's desire is to be loved, right? And so the feigned affection that Haski gives him is something that he wants, even if it's false.
And then, of course, from the outside looking in, Bulma can't differentiate what's happening because she's blinded by her dislike towards Yamcha.
Yes, and because of her uncharitable interpretation, she is damned to experience some suffering uh, for disrespecting the opportunity of the male spirit here, um, and that which he represents. I think it builds upon what we're going to see in the next episode.
Yeah, this whole episode is that sort of setting the stage for the next episode, And we had I'm not sure if we talked this time about it, but that idea of the I mean, this is all a circus, right? And especially with the joke about the balls and about everyone scrambling between teapots and everything like that. This is a chaotic carnival type celebration that is at the edge of sort of a turning, right? It's that you could call it at the edge of the world. It's got that dome over it, right? It's elevated up above the city and it's sort of almost out of uh, eyesight, right? It's so high. And so it's up there on the edge, and it's this sort of party on the edge of the world. And that's what the carnival, that Dionysian, indulgent thing, has always been mythologically, right? It's the turning of the season, it's a celebration of the cycle of the year. And this is the end of a cycle for Bulma, right? She's coming up on the end of this cycle, or this, I would say, phase of her life.
Which is the end of her adolescence and her entrance into the real adult world with all of its terrors and exploitations. Because we've seen some predation on Bulma for her sex and her youth, let's say, both by Pilaf and Roshi, but nothing's gonna compare with what we're gonna see in the next episode.
Hmm.
And so her disrespect towards the genuine masculine spirit of Yamcha here kind of damns her for what's going to happen next. Would you agree?
Absolutely. It's an escalation of her disrespect towards the logos that is setting the stage for the name of the next episode, right?
Such a rebellious phase is what her parents say,
Right.
which is
Her
it's
father and her cosmic father, in a sense, says
right.
such a rebellious phase.
Not just that, but the maternal spirit as well
Hmm.
acknowledges that she's in that phase. So Yamcha is uh ultimately overcome and gives up the balls to Haski, and it's because of Bulma's interaction. She actually interferes and interrupts Yamcha from resisting her, and she is able to get the Dragon Balls and get away while telling Yamcha that she's going to blow up the entire amusement park.
Blow up the entire game
Right.
in
The
the
whole hierarchy
festival.
is just going to be destroyed. And so Goku finds her, tries to race after her, right? She goes out of the top of the amusement park and he chases her into the city. Um while there, she is knocked off of her vehicle and Goku is able to actually, she's not knocked off. Sorry. I want to reiterate. She is distracted. Goku flies with the Nimbus
Hmm.
and distracts her long enough that she runs into a building to where she jumps out and Goku saves her life by using the power pole to wedge in the side of the building through her belt and keep her alive. Meanwhile, he catches the remote and stops the bomb from exploding the entire park. But this all happens in the course of like 5 or 6 minutes. And this is kind of what I mean when it was saying that it lingers and it's very slowly paced because this iteration, like the dominance of Goku's spirit over the spirit in which Haski represents, has already been iterated upon multiple times. I mean, especially in the Murasaki
Yeah,
episodes.
there's not really that tension of thinking to yourself, "Oh, is this something that's going to overpower Goku? Oh, can she outrun the Nimbus? Oh no." You know what I mean? We've already seen people try to outrun the Nimbus in similar ways. It doesn't work. Goku's just chasing her down and essentially setting things right, as Goku does in stories like this, where it seems like the we've already been told now as the audience that the setting of this episode is a setup for a threat that's going to be resolved now in the episode, right? And that calls it a bottle episode. It's a bubble. I mean, it's literally a bubble, and it's calling itself a bottle episode.
It's a bubble within a bubble. So Goku gets the remote, he turns off the bomb, and pretty much all is solved. He tickles Haski into giving him the Dragon Balls, and the Red Ribbon thugs are then apprehended as well. So everything really ends, and then Bulma has already left, and everyone returns to Capsule Corp, only to find that Bulma is already there and salty that Yamcha exists. She's just salty Yamcha exists.
She slaps Yamcha in the face for what
She
he's
perceives was a betrayal, but was really Yamcha being assaulted, let's say.
right.
And
Red, he smiles right before he gets slapped in the face because he doesn't understand her misinterpretation of things, right? She hasn't spoken to him. She hasn't tried to communicate.
that is to say that the spirit of deception is able to manipulate Yamcha in such a way to hurt his regard amongst Bulma and other potential mates, let's say. And so he gets slapped unknowingly, and it's kind of a message that he shouldn't even put himself in those positions to begin with. It's kind of almost a based message, let's say.
Sort of a cautionary tale, right? That's just like, hey, this is just how it is.
Right, and even though it's filler, like we said, there are certain elements that really align with the spirit of it. But I think that kind of brings us
Well,
to a
I do have one question
good
for you
section.
before
Okay.
we move on from the episode. And I was going to see if you thought there was any significance to the fact that Haski needed to be saved by Goku using the power pole and catching her with it. Because usually he catches someone with the Nimbus, you could say, right? He swoops down and catches them. Or he'll, it's not every day that he catches someone with the power pole.
Well, I think it's to say, and there is significance to it. I think it's to say that using that ancestral spirit to um induce the submission of the spirit of deception is because he doesn't hang it over her head per se, but he leaves her hanging with it, and it is in a way that he's hanging it over her, right? That the ancestral spirit confronting things with truth is that above her and is the only thing keeping her up so that he can
It's almost like
extract.
reminding her that the logos is her last thing that she can hold on
Right.
to keep to hold
No,
to stop
yeah,
her from
there's
falling down,
significance
right,
there for
into the
sure.
void. Um, but I just kind of wanted to point that out because that was specifically how he used the power pole in this episode, which is
Mm,
different from how he normally uses it, right?
yes. And so that kind of brings us to the end of the episode as Bluma and Goku take off to have their adventure in the ocean lands,
In the deep blue sea.
in the deep blue sea. So, if you liked what you heard, please give us a like and subscribe. Please leave us a comment if you agree, if you disagree,
Please
whatever it is.
rumble.
The please rumble to subscribe, and on YouTube we're gonna have new episodes Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. On Rumble and starting this week, we're gonna start having BitChute episodes, as well, starting Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So be aware of that. Rumble will also upload on that same schedule, except an additional episode on Friday. Anything else before we go, Brock?
I think that's about all of the housekeeping.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up. This was Get the Mic. We were discussing episode 45 of Dragon Ball, Danger in the Air, and it ends with our hero and Bulma taking off into the sunset. I think that's a good place to leave off. We'll see all of you next time.
See ya.
violent electrical storm erupted in the skies of the planet I was on. I welcomed it. Like it was an outward manifestation of the storm